All right, so welcome to our September Knowledge Nibbles. So the topics we are going to be covering, most of this is going to be a weight management. So why is it important to keep our dogs nice and healthy weight-wise? What does a healthy dog look like? Going through some body condition charts. This way you guys can judge for yourselves whether your pet might or your puppy in training might need to lose or gain a couple pounds, how to actually maintain a healthy weight. We'll actually go through the steps to return to a healthy weight. So I have a really good link to use. You guys can just plug in a little bit of information there and it'll actually tell you sort of where your dog should be, how to transition a dog to a new food, and then activities to help maintain a healthy weight. We will be getting into just a little bit of nutrition. So what nutrients do our dogs require? What should we be looking for in dog food? The difference between puppy, adult, and senior nutrition. And then just talking about sort of what to look for in treats and what are some good training treats. We all know our labs and our lab golden crosses love food, so just making sure that we're not overfeeding them and we are choosing treats that are appropriate. So why is a healthy weight important? So the biggest thing is it's going to increase the longevity of your pet. Any extra weight puts a lot of extra strain on our dog's overall system. So things like long-term joint health. If we have any extra weight, that's putting a lot of extra pressure on our dog's joints that they have to walk through every single day. We decrease the risk of hypertension, decrease the risk of diabetes. It also decreases the risks of that any increase in weight actually increases the risks of our dogs having cancer. And I think also one of the reasons for that is a lot of times cancers comes up as lumps and bumps. And if our dogs are overweight, we just can't detect them as quickly as we would if our dogs were a healthy weight. And then lastly, decrease the risk of heart disease. But overall, if we have a dog that's a nice healthy weight, they are going to want to be more active. They're going to be more in tune with you. They're going to be more in tune with our clients. They're going to live a longer, healthier life. So really important factor for not only our service dogs in training, but for our pets as well. So what does a healthy dog actually look like? So underweight, obviously we don't want our dogs to be underweight. Things that you're going to look for if your dog maybe needs to gain a couple pounds, the rib, spine, pelvic bone, they're going to be very easily visible and very easily felt. They do have this hourglass look, but it's a bit extreme. These dogs tend to look a little bit emaciated, so we want to make sure that if our dogs are underweight, if we're seeing those ribs, the spine, the pelvic bones, we're getting them assessed and maybe increasing their food a little bit. Overweight dogs, here, rib, spine, pelvic bones are not visible and they're not easily felt. So if you are running your hands down your dog's body, you can't feel any of those land markers that we want to kind of lightly be able to palpate with our dogs. So these dogs are overweight dogs. They have very much no shape to them. These are dogs that we are going to look at putting on a bit of a diet and getting that weight back under control. And then lastly, we have our ideal weight. So with our ideal weight, the rib, spine, and pelvic bones may be slightly visible. It kind of depends on your dog's body condition, but they're very easily felt. So if you are rubbing your hands sort of along your dog's body, you're going to be able to lightly feel the outline of each rib. You'll probably be able to see those pelvic bones, the kind of two pointy processes up at the top sort of near their back ends. So we want to be able to feel those just very slightly. We want our dogs to kind of have a nice fat layer over that. So here we have sort of two different body condition systems. So for NSD, we tend to use the Purina body condition system, which is numbered 1 through 9. I know a lot of vet clinics generally use the body condition system of 1 to 5. It really just depends on your vet, the vet techs, or whatever organization you're working with. I like the 1 to 9 just because it kind of gives us a little bit more variation. So if we are looking at our Purina body condition system, ideally we are looking for our dogs to be around a 4 or a 5. So you can see the picture there. Our dog is nice and lean. If you're looking from a bird's eye view, our dog has a nice tuck. If we're looking from a side view, again, they have a nice tuck up from their waist. With our dogs that are too thin, so if we're looking at anywhere from 1 to 3, you can see in those diagrams that the ribs, the pelvic bones, the spine, they're very obvious in the dog. You know, any kind of sudden movement that the dog makes, you're going to really be able to see those processes. And then as we get up to 6, 7, 8, 9, those are dogs that are obese. 9 is like off of this chart. I really hope that, you know, most people sort of catch that before their dogs get to that weight, because at that point they really have no shape. They have no form. I tend to refer to those dogs as sausage dogs because they're just kind of one linear line. There is no outlines of the ribs, pelvic bones, spine. All right, so if we can get into how to maintain a healthy weight. So the very first thing that you will want to do is actually calculate your pet's caloric intake. I know this is probably something fairly new to a lot of people. A lot of people just go off of sort of what's on the back of their dog food bag. A lot of times those are actually a lot higher quantities than our dogs should actually be eating. I will link up to this website in a little bit and just show you guys how easy it is to actually find this information for your pets. Step 2, you want to make sure you're weighing your dogs as the seasons change. So again, like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, different seasons bring different exercise needs, requirements for our dogs. We tend in the spring, summer, and fall, we tend to be a lot more active with our furry friends. As the colder weather comes, it can be a little bit more difficult to get them outside and get them active. So if we're trying to weigh our dogs at least 3 to 4 times a year, we can really make sure that we are staying on top of their weight and we're not seeing large fluctuations depending on how much activity they're getting. If you're trying to find somewhere to weigh your dogs, most vet clinics have scales in the waiting room. If you're going to a vet clinic, I would suggest just giving them a call ahead and just asking if it's okay if you stop by. And a lot of dog food stores are starting to have scales kind of as soon as you walk in. I know by me, the Wrens, there's Chews. I think even the Pet Value has a scale. So again, making it really accessible for pet owners to make sure that they're keeping on top of their pet's weight, and then just making sure you're writing it down and keeping track of it. And then lastly, we need to make sure that we are incorporating regular exercise into our daily routines. So again, walks, play dates. In the winter, I know it can be a little bit tricky, and I do have some ideas for helping your pet stay active inside the house, but there's lots of different games that we can play, and it might even just mean we need to sort of lower our dog's daily caloric intake in the winter if We just don't have access to the same level of activity. So we're actually just going to go through a little bit of a demo here on steps how to return our pets to a healthy weight. I know this is a question I always get. If our pets or our service dogs are a little bit overweight, how do we get them to a healthy weight? And then how do we maintain that weight? So I just have a fake dog here. Our dog's name is Fido. His current weight is 110 pounds, so he's a big boy. Current food is Purina chicken and rice. So with that, you'll want to go and find how many calories are there per cup. So for our Purina chicken and rice adult, it's 407 kcal per cup. Another really important factor, please make sure you're using an actual measuring cup. When you are measuring out your dog's food, we shouldn't be using like a red Solo cup, a random mug, a random glass, because you're not going to get accurate results. Making sure you're using a 250 ml measuring cup. Our friend Fido was eating 4 cups a day. So that is 1,628 kcals per day, which we will realize is quite a high amount of food. And then we also need to make sure that we are adding in those daily treats. So our friend is getting roughly 4 bacon strips a day. And each one of those comes to 36 kcals. So again, if we times that by 4, we're looking at almost an extra 150 calories per day. And that's probably being pretty generous with the amount of treats. But that is why we always say making sure that we are measuring the total quantity that our dogs are getting every day. And then lastly, our daily activity is quite low. We see Fido is only getting 2 10-minute walks a day. Walking can be good exercise for our dogs, but in general, unless we are going for an extended period of time, it is at a nice brisk pace. Our dogs are not really burning any calories with just a leisurely 10-minute walk. That's probably maybe 50 calories, which is not helpful for a friend here who is quite overweight. So then if we look, our total daily caloric intake, we are at 1,772 kcals, which is a lot of food. Even though our friend is a big dog, that is still way too much. So how are we going to get our friend to a nice healthy weight? This is not a picture of Fido. I will just put that out there. This is Tundra, and he is a perfectly healthy weight. So if we're looking at our dog, we want to now base it off of what do we think the ideal weight of our dog is. So if we look, this can be a little bit tricky. This is where I would suggest, making sure you're consulting your vet to make sure that we're not setting our expectations too low. As you work with dogs, you kind of just, get into the groove of things and figure out what weights our dogs should be. So our ideal weight for Fido is 90 pounds. So he needs to lose a good 20 pounds. That's a lot of weight on a dog. So that's actually going to take quite a bit of time. So the very first thing that I would look at doing is looking at doing a food switch, especially when we have a dog that needs to lose so much weight. I want to look at a food that's lower in calories. So for us, we are going to use a Purina overweight management. The caloric content per cup of this is 256. So this is, quite a bit lower than our Purina chicken and rice. This just means that our friend Fido is going to still be able to eat a decent quantity of food because he is a big dog. and we're not gonna have to sacrifice the quantity, which can be quite tricky for our lab friends. We know, again, that they like to eat. So if we really drastically cut that amount back, it can have some detrimental side effects. We are also going to slightly decrease the amount of food that our friend is getting. So previously we were up around 4 cups. We are going to decrease to 3.5 cups. So if we're looking, that's going to be a total of 896 kcals per day, which is more than half of what our friend was eating before. So as you can see, our friend was eating almost double what they should be eating. Again, we still want to make sure that we are incorporating treats into their daily life, but making sure that we are taking that proportion out of that daily calorie. Extra kcals, that's about an extra half a cup of kibble or 2 bacon strips. But it is really important because it is really easy just to keep piling in those treats. And then all of a sudden, you have an extra 500 calories a day, which is not going to help our friend lose weight. And then lastly, as important as food is, daily activity is also really important. We want to make sure that we are increasing the amount of activity that we are getting, because our friend was so, I'm trying to think of the right word. I don't want to say lazy, but because our friend was not getting a lot of exercise before, we need to make sure that we are increasing gradually, especially for a dog that has an extra 20 pounds on them. Moving and even just walking around puts a lot of extra stress on their joints. So we want to make sure that we are gradually increasing the amount of activity. Activity can go up as that weight comes down. So what I'm going to do quickly, I'm going to pop over to this website and hopefully you guys can see it. Can you see this website?
Yep, you're good.
Perfect. So this is a fantastic tool for anybody to use. It's very easy. It's very user-friendly, and it maps out exactly what you need. It actually has a feature where you can add your dogs, well, you can do any pet, their type of food, and it'll actually calculate how much they should be eating. So if we go in here and we put in Fido's initial weight, which was 110 pounds. Another factor that comes into play is if your dog is spayed, neutered, or intact. Generally, dogs that are spayed or neutered have a little bit lower of a caloric intake requirement. So that is pretty important to include there. And then we have, what is our ideal pet weight? So we have said 90 pounds. You can also add in the body condition score. So again, this one is out of 9. So for a dog that's 20 pounds overweight, they'll probably around the 8 mark here, between a 7 and 8. Like, that's quite a lot of extra weight. So if we look over to our right here, so we have our ideal weight is 90 pounds. Percent over ideal weight. So we're 22.2% over our ideal weight. And our estimated initial daily calories is 1582. And they actually have here, one second. This is different than when I did it earlier. There we go. So we put in our dog's body condition score. Our dog is quite overweight. You need to add this, obviously, because they don't know what type of dog we have. We could have a giant Saint Bernard, and 110 pounds actually means that they are emaciated. We're talking about a pretty average large lab here, but who is overweight. So if we're looking here, our food, we want to be at around 865 calories. And they actually give you want your treats around 100 calories a day. So this is perfect if anyone is struggling with a pet that's overweight. Go in here, plug in that information, and it gives you the daily calories that you should be feeding. Then you just go look at the kcals per cup of the food that you are feeding, and you can easily calculate that information. All right, so just to briefly sort of recap of our steps to return to a healthy weight. So number one, we want to adjust the caloric intake. Step two, you want to be weighing your dog every 2 to 3 weeks. Ideally, we're looking for dogs to lose 1 to 2% of their body weight per week. You don't really want your dogs to lose any more than that. That can put a lot of stress on their bodies. So trying to keep it to 1 to 2%. So for our friend Fido, he was initially 110 pounds. So we're looking initially for him to lose kind of 1 to 2 pounds per week. So we just want to make sure that we are keeping track of that by weighing quite frequently. Step three, increase the activity levels weekly. This will help avoid plateaus. A lot of times I see we just decrease the food intake, but we don't increase that activity. And then we start to kind of pause with our weight loss. Step four, once we have reached our ideal weight, you really want to make sure that you are continuing to weigh your dog quite frequently. So I would suggest doing it at least once a month, because you're probably going to need to play around with how much food they're getting daily, because obviously we were at a point where we wanted our dogs to lose weight. Once they're at the ideal weight, we might need to either switch off of a weight management foods or just slightly increase the amount of food that they are getting daily. And then again, for maintenance, weigh your dogs with the change of seasons as our activity levels change, making sure we're adjusting food as needed. And then just quickly, how to transition a dog to new food. This is something that if you are a raiser with us, we do quite often, whether your puppy has some stomach issues when they're young or they're transitioning from puppy to adult food. So we thought we would just talk about this quickly. So again, whenever you're switching a new food, we want to make sure that we are looking at the caloric intake. So obviously puppy food to adult food, there is going to be a little bit of a difference. For NSD, we use Purina Chicken Rice Large Breed Puppy and Purina Chicken Rice Adult. There's actually not a huge difference in the kcals per cup. So we generally feed our dogs the same. Most of our dogs eat 3 cups daily. Sometimes as our dogs get a little bit older, especially after they've been spayed or neutered, we start to have to decrease that daily caloric intake. And then just looking at how do we transition food. So generally we suggest transitioning over a 7-day period. Most of our dogs have pretty strong stomachs, but there obviously is a difference in the content of the food. So we just want to make sure that we are setting our dogs up to be successful, and we're not setting them up to have soft stools or diarrhea, because that is really annoying. So yeah, doing it over 7 days, AM, PM, and we're just transitioning quite slowly. And this is also always handed out to our volunteers when we are switching foods. And then just some key points to remember when you are going to be switching your dog's food. You really want to make sure that you're sticking to feeding only the old food and the new food. You don't want to be adding in any additional treats, as the treats could be the reason for diarrhea and not so much the food switch. So while you're doing a transition, just stick to kibble. Don't add in anything else to their diet. If we start seeing soft stool or diarrhea, we want to stick at that transitional amount until the stools return to normal. So let's say, we're at half a cup of the new food and half a cup of the old food. You just want to stick on that until those stools return to a nice solid shape. Always important making sure we're taking a portion out of their meals for training and treats. Again, just helps avoid overfeeding. Overfeeding is also another reason that our dogs get diarrhea. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed, if you have a big training day, you're out, the dog's probably getting some extra food. That might turn into diarrhea the next day. That is a huge reason. And then lastly, we can add up to 2 tablespoons of pure pumpkin puree. This just contains a lot of fiber. This will help firm up those stools if we're dealing with any soft stool issues. And then just looking at some activities to help maintain a healthy weight. So obviously getting out, daily walks, daily activity, being labs, they love to play with other dogs. That is great activity too. Even if it's just 15 to 30 minutes of them romping around with their friends, that gets them really active and that will burn a lot of calories for them. Feeding meals not in bowls. This is also a great mental stimulation, but it also kind of helps our dogs feel fuller because they're not just going into their bowl and gobbling their food all at once. So some options here, we have our kibble dispensing toys. So treat balls, Kongs, there's all kinds of different toys that people have invented that dispense kibble. Increased training, so maybe taking a portion out and doing some training. A very simple one is just kibble wrapped up in blankets and towels. I like to just lay out a blanket, I'll sprinkle the kibble all around, and then you just roll that towel blanket back up, and the dogs have to use their nose, their paws to get all that kibble out. Puzzle toys, if we're using puzzle toys, making sure that they are appropriate for the age of our dogs. We don't want our dogs to be getting frustrated while eating. That can turn into some negative behaviors. So just being aware that the puzzle might be a little bit too difficult for the age of the dog and we need to make it a little bit easier. One of the things that I love to do in the summer is soak kibble. Then I'll actually just put it in like a big Tupperware, fill it with water, and then the kibble is just kind of in a big block of ice. I send my dogs outside and they kind of chew away as that ice melts. They get lots of pieces of kibble, a really good entertainment activity for our dogs. Some other things that we can do for, in the house or just to keep that weight off, hide and seek in the house. You can have making sure you're starting easy. So starting on one level, ask your dog for a down stay, down wait. You can simply go hide and then recall your dog. As they get better at this game, you can go upstairs, downstairs. Great way to just get a little bit more activity for our dogs, especially if the weather is not good. And recall practice, that's another great one. Just remembering with recall, if our dogs are off leash, they need to be in a fully fenced in area. If not, we are more than happy for you guys to utilize a long line if you don't have a fenced in area. So just like humans, our dogs will require
Rachel,
Yep.
there was one question.
We have a question. All right.
So Jane was wondering how you would determine the dog's ideal weight.
So that can be a little bit tricky. It comes with experience. I would suggest seeking out a professional. So talking to your vet is a great way. Even just simply sending your vet clinic some photos. So if you looked at the body condition chart, we always have a picture of the dog from the side and then a picture of the dog from the bird's eye view. If you simply send those off to your vet clinic, they should be able to give you a pretty good idea of how much weight your dog needs to lose. And it's also one of those things that if your dog is overweight, just starting to gradually decrease the weight. You don't have to be exact. We're never going to be at exact of what their ideal weight should be, but start going, okay, so if my dog's 100 pounds, maybe they need to lose 5 pounds. Let's start with that. Once they hit that 5 pound mark, let's reassess their body condition score. Maybe they need to lose an extra 2 to 3 pounds. So it doesn't have to be like a big chunk like we did with our friend Fido of losing 20 pounds. Does that make sense?
I think Holly also has a question. Before that, I was just gonna throw in, if you have an NSD puppy in training, like puppy staff are very well aware of what your dog's ideal weight is, and we do weigh them more than enough to make sure that they're staying within that zone. So you guys don't have to play a guessing game with your NSD puppies. We have set their ideal weights already.
Yes.
Holly, did you have a question?
Yeah, does the ideal weight ever change? So for when I got Doc, I was given his range to keep him within, and I was wondering, like, if the dog gets older, does that ideal weight ever change?
It does. As our friends kind of start to hit that senior level, just like people, that weight tends to kind of pack on a little bit more. So we do want to be mindful that we're not letting them get too big. But if they're holding on to a couple extra pounds, that's generally okay. Just because, you know, actually, as dogs get older, I do prefer to see them, you know, not as lean as I would like a young dog, just because as we get older, we start to see some medical issues, which generally lead to weight loss. So if we can have our dogs, you know, kind of at a nice, healthy weight, that's what I really like to see with our older dogs. All right, so again, just nutrients, protein, carbs, fats, vitamin and minerals, and water. Those are kind of our most important nutrients. Those are our big 6 groups that we want to look at when we are assessing dog foods. I will say I am not a nutrition expert when it comes to dogs. I have done quite a bit of research myself, but if anyone is looking for kind of specific nutrition requirements, it is best that you have this discussion with your vet, as they have done the schooling and done all the research needed to make sure that your pets, your service dogs, are eating a nice, nutritious, well-balanced diet. Some things to look for in dog food. If you look for labels that are compliant with AAFCO, I can't remember what this acronym stands for, but it is an American association, which a lot of the foods that we get are regulated in America, but that just means that the dog food is meeting all the requirements. So Purina, they are recognized by this. They meet all of the requirements in order to pass the certification. Or you can look for a complete and balanced diet. So that is really important. You want to make sure that we are hitting all those nutrients that our dogs need, and it is balanced. So depending on the age of the dog, if there's any medical issues, you're going to need kind of different components. So some dogs might need higher protein, some might need lower protein, some dogs need higher carbs, lower carbs. So it is one of those things I would say trying to figure out what to feed your dog can be quite difficult. I know I went through it with my pet, trying to figure out what to feed him. But like I said, your vets are always a great ally in trying to figure out what food is best for your dog. There's also lots of pet nutritionists out there that have gone through all the schooling in science. Again, just pets with various health issues, they may require specialty diet. So unfortunately, one of the things we see quite often is allergies, food allergies. So that might be to chicken, it might be to certain preservatives. A lot of dogs, if they're allergic to chicken, they're allergic to other feathered creatures. So it can be a little bit of a guessing game if we're dealing with something like allergies, finding a food that agrees with our dogs. And it is just a little bit of trial and error. Generally, if we are looking at switching our dog's food, it takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks to actually see a change. Diet for our dogs. So in medical conditions, that's going to change what components we need. So kidney, liver disease, pancreatitis, all those things, our dogs are going to have to be on specialty diets. Obesity, again, we just talked about that. Specialty diets, we're looking for something that's low in calories, a weight management food to make sure that we're supporting those needs. Things like bladder stones. So health conditions, that is going to change the type of food that your dog needs to eat. And then pets in different life stages have different nutritional requirements. So very quickly, puppy nutritional requirements. So a puppy is defined as, from the time that they are born until the time that they've reached maturity. So this is generally between 12 to 18 months. It depends on the breed of the dog. So smaller breeds, they actually age faster. So they tend to reach maturity between 10 and 12 months of age. Our labs generally hit maturity around 18 months of age. These guys require a diet with optimal growth. Large breed puppies, they actually require diets that are going to support their growth at an optimal pace to avoid bone and joint issues. So with our dogs, we actually feed them a large breed diet. If our dogs grow too quickly, it can lead to a variety of different bone and joint issues. So we need to be very careful with that they're not growing too quickly, that we're not overly feeding them. And then with our puppies compared to our adults, they're generally eating the same amount of food, even though they are quite smaller, just because of those requirements that they require at such a young age. They also burn a lot of calories just with their puppiness. So adult dogs, this is generally once they fully matured, so are 10 to 12 months of age until 5 to 7 years of age. Again, depends on the breeds. Other factors that will affect the feeding requirement are spaying and neutering. Like I mentioned earlier, most dogs that are spayed and neutered require less calories per day than our intact friends. The daily activity level, so for some of our service dogs, their energy output is going to be greater, so they might need to eat a little bit of food. If we have sporting, hunting dogs, they're going to require quite a bit more calories throughout the day than if we just have, I always like to talk about my pet who's just hangs around the house and sleeps all day. And then lastly, we have our medical conditions. There are certain medical conditions that are obviously going to affect our feeding requirements. And then lastly, we have our senior nutritional requirements. So this is generally defined as dogs anywhere above the age of 7. So for this, it is really important to maintain a healthy weight. Like I mentioned earlier, as our dogs start to get older, either we see them lean towards the overweight side, or if they have any underlying medical conditions, we start to see them lose weight. So it can be a bit of a guessing game on the caloric intake that they need. We really want to make sure that we are keeping our older pets active. So we don't want our pets to have muscle loss. If they have muscle loss, it's just going to make daily activity more difficult for them. So making sure we are keeping them nice and active. You also want to make sure that you are attending regular vet visits to check for any underlying conditions. Again, those underlying conditions can really play with our dogs, our weight, and just their overall health. As they get older, we tend to see bigger issues. Um, we start to run into joint issues, heart issues. Um, Allergies is a big one as our dogs get older. And then the one that nobody likes to hear is cancer. Cancer is a big one as our dogs age. So making sure that, if we have any weird lumps or bumps, things that just don't look right, we're taking our dogs in to get vet checked.
Rachel, this might be a good time for Lisa's question.
Yeah.
Lisa, maybe you can just clarify. She was asking about more for older dogs. I think this was maybe, are these things acceptable to add? Lisa, you can jump in here. She was asking about yogurt with probiotics if they have issues with yeast infections, especially in their paw pads and ears, and fish oil for arthritic joints.
Yeah, so there is a lot of great supplements that can be added to your pet's diet. Again, this is a conversation that I would make sure having either with your vet team, if you have a service dog with NSD, reach out to client services, and they generally come reach out to me. And if I need to, I can reach out to our vet clinic to get some more details on what are appropriate supplements for our dogs. But yeah, generally as our dogs age, they adding in things like fish oils are great for their skin, their coats. It just helps add in that extra fat that sometimes they can be missing. And then the other one was, I believe it was yogurt and probiotics. Probiotics are great. I would suggest looking at getting an actual probiotic for your dog. The ones in yogurt, so humans and dogs and animals, they actually have different gut probiotics. So the ones that are in yogurt are geared toward humans, where we want to make sure that we are gearing towards our dog's gut flora. So you do want to look at getting a specific probiotic that is for dogs. That would be my suggestion if we're looking at doing probiotics. You can also look, a lot of senior diets, they tend to have higher omegas. They have those extra nutrients that our dogs kind of tend to lack as they get older. But like I said, if anybody has any specific questions, feel free, for the service dogs and the service dogs that have graduated, feel free to reach out to the client services teams. Some things to give: what food your dog is currently eating, how much they're currently eating, and what additives are they getting? Are they getting any medication? Do they have any supplements? And then they can pass that to me, and I can take a look kind of what they're getting in their daily intake, and we can kind of have a discussion if we should be taking anything out or adding anything in. And then lastly, I just wanted to quickly talk about what to look for in treats. So we talked about kibble. I am a huge believer, especially with our lab golden crosses. Most of them will work happily just for their kibble. It makes it really easy to make sure that we're not overfeeding our dogs. But if we want to give our dogs some extra treats, these are just some things to look out for. So you want to look at the ingredients. We want to make sure the ingredients that are not going to upset our dog's stomach. If your dog is dealing with any allergies, this is really important. You don't all of a sudden want to have this big flare up and trying to figure out what it is. Then you realize it's the treats you gave 2 weeks ago. When you are introducing new treats, introduce one new treat at a time. I suggest doing it for about 2 weeks and then adding in a different treat. Again, this is just to know in case your dog has some sort of reaction to it. We want to use treats that are easy to break up into smaller pieces. So a lot of treats that are commercially processed are quite large, and those large treats, our dogs just swallow them whole. They don't really care what the size is. So if you can find soft or crumbly treats, take a big piece and break it into, 5 or 6 smaller pieces. That's really going to help make sure that we're not over treating our dogs. Kind of a general rule of thumb when we are training with treats, the treat should be no bigger than your baby fingernail. That's kind of the size that we're aiming towards if we're using treats as food rewards. You want to look for treats that are low in calories. So there are a lot of treats out there that like each individual piece is like 2 to 3 calories. That's kind of a good basis to go off of. And like I said, utilizing the dog's kibble for most training treating, I would say try and use that for 75% of your treats. A really important thing to keep in mind is the value of your treats. So, I always say we should be using kibble for the majority of our training. Our dogs love food. We don't really need to get into those higher value treats unless we are doing some sort of difficult training. So let's say we have a puppy in training that is highly dog distracted, right? They see a dog 2 blocks down and they start losing their mind. That's when I'm going to want to be using my higher value treats because it is a difficult activity for my dog. I don't want to be giving my dog a high value treat for just sitting, because then we're putting the value of a sit on that higher value treat. So just keeping that in mind when we are offering a variety of different treats to our dogs. What are some good training treats? So I really like liver bites. They're easy to store in your treat pouch. They're easily broken into smaller pieces, and they tend to be quite low in calories overall. And they're quite smelly, which is nice. If our dogs are struggling with any kind of behavior, those smelly treats are always beneficial to have. I quite like fruitables. I'm not sure if you can get them in pet stores, but I see them at like Winners and HomeSense all the time. They're soft and they're easy to break in half. And they actually have ones that are called skinny minis, and each one is about 3 calories. They're nice and soft. They have all different kinds of flavors. A lot of them incorporate pumpkin too, which is just some nice extra fiber. And then Zooks, they have Zooks minis, they have Zooks regular size. Zooks comes in all different kinds of flavors. Again, just easy, soft and easy to break in half. And they're super easy to store in your treat pouch. I tend to avoid anything that is like a dog biscuit, because those can be really tricky to break in half, and they tend to be quite high in calories.
Rachel, Joan was wondering, what about fresh fruit as treats?
I am getting into that on this slide.
Perfect.
Awesome. So I just named this human grade treats. One of the big things that I want to point out is anything that is coming from your kitchen, it needs to be prepared when the dog is out of the kitchen. So we don't want our dogs learning, oh, I'm cutting up a carrot. The dog's like sitting beside you and be like, that carrot's for me, right? So anything that's being prepared for your dog should be on their mat, in their crate, and then that food should be getting in a baggie in a treat pouch and not coming from the kitchen table, just to avoid our friends doing any extra begging around human food. So things like fruits and vegetables, they can be great for our pets, for our dogs. Again, they should be cut into small portions and limited to training or stuffing in something like a Kong. We really just want to make sure that we're not just handing out these things willy-nilly, because they are quite high value. We want to be using them to motivate our dogs. So things like carrots, blueberries, apples, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, banana, those are all really great things. Just keep in mind, a lot of fruit is really high in sugar. So things like sweet potatoes, I know a lot of people really like to use sweet potatoes, but they are quite high in sugar. So just being mindful of that. We always want to just not be overfeeding these things. They should be used for training purposes or stuffing Kongs. Their kibble is really their best options, kind of as that main source, and then just adding these things in for a little extra taste, a little extra treat here and there. Things like peanut butter and other nut butters, I do suggest trying to keep it to a maximum of about 1 tablespoon at a time. We shouldn't be filling a Kong full of peanut butter. That is a lot for our dogs. Again, I like to fill my Kongs mostly with kibble, and I usually top it up with some peanut butter. I might add in something like a banana if I have a banana going bad, or an apple. Generally, I use my fruit and vegetables that are a bit past their expiration and add that into my stuffed Kongs or training treats. Just one thing to note with any sort of peanut butters or nut butters, making sure you're looking at the ingredients. You want to make sure that there's no xylitol in them, because that is quite toxic to dogs. I believe that there are a few companies that use this, so just making sure you're reading the ingredients list before we're giving our dogs any of those products. Pure pumpkin puree, I love this stuff. I do say try to maximum at 2 tablespoons at a time, just because it is quite high in fiber. We don't want to be overdoing it with our dogs. But again, great for toppers or great for mixing in with your kibble just to add a little bit more flavor. But yeah, pure pumpkin puree is fantastic. Just making sure that you're getting the pure pumpkin puree and you're not getting one that has different ingredients in it. I know you can get like pumpkin pie filling, which is quite a bit higher in sugar, and I do believe it contains some other ingredients. And then just lastly, I wanted to talk about really high value rewards. So things like cheese, deli meats, hot dogs. These should really only be used with the guidance of your trainer. They should not just be given out freely. So again, if we're looking at the value of our rewards, things like cheese, deli meat, and hot dogs are like the cream of the crop. You don't get much better than that. So we really want to save these things for those skills that our dogs really struggle with, because this is going to be such a huge value reward for them. I don't want to just be, my dog sat, here's a piece of cheese, because we're not putting any value on that. My dogs just think, I can sit and get cheese. Again, and I say making sure you're talking to your trainer, because things like cheese, deli meat, hot dogs, those are the things we can kind of overdo it on, and then we start to see that weight increase a little bit. So just being mindful of that. That is everything that I have for you guys. Are there any questions? Tom, what do you recommend for chews? So chews can be quite tricky. I like to find chews that, we obviously want chews that last a long time, right? That's the whole point of a chew, is that you're giving to them and it's using up a little bit of time. It's not just a chew they're going to get and they're going to eat right away. So one of the things that I know a lot of people do give their dogs are things like the greenies and stuff like that. And those, for our large breed dogs, those are gone in 2 seconds. It's like a 2-bite brownie to them, and it's just really high in calories. So stuff like that I try to avoid. For chews, I'm trying to think. I don't use a lot of chews with my guys just because they just don't last. But a lot of people use like the Benny bullies. So those are your long stick-like pieces. You can get them at pet stores. They are quite smelly, so I do suggest that if you are using those, you're okay with them chewing them and probably creating some smells. I'm losing my I'm trying to think of the chews that we use at NSD. The Purina Dental. Let me see if I can find them. My words are not coming to
They're
me.
called like digestive chews or something. Very similar to the Chewies. They're like similar to a rawhide, but the digestible version. And I believe Pet Value also has ones called no hide that are the same thing, but like kind of rolled up.
Awesome. Yes, that's exactly what I was getting at, Emma. Thank you. Yeah, so they'll like rawhides, but they have a digestive enzyme on them. So if our dogs are getting off pieces that are a little bit bigger, we don't need to worry about them not digesting them fully. Like if they swallow them, they will digest them. I do still suggest any kind of chew that you are giving to your dogs, that you are monitoring them. A lot of dogs, as you get to the end of a chew, will just swallow those pieces, and can be dangerous. Most chews are fully digestible, but just being on the safe side, if we're leaving our dogs unsupervised, I always just say give them a frozen stuffed Kong. That's my number one go-to, because we know, I say that, but I do know labs that have chewed Kongs, but for the most part, Kongs are a safe option to give if they are unsupervised. Winter activities. I know winter can be very tricky. Depending on your dog, even doing like if you can, if you have the ability to do stairs are a really great activity. It's getting all their joints moving, it's getting their brain going. I wouldn't suggest having your dog run up and down stairs, but having them walk up and down the stairs, doing it 10 times or so. Not with young puppies, but with our older dogs. We want to make sure that our dogs are fully mature for their joints if we're doing a lot of stairs, but stairs is a great activity. For those that have public access, getting out into malls, I know I love with my puppies in training in the winter, bad weather, I can just go to a mall and get some activity. Like I mentioned, hide and seek in the house, that's another great one. Even if you have like the treat dispensing ball, if you have a dog that might not be super motivated by toys, a treat dispensing ball can help increase that, kind of rolling it up and down the hallway, just getting them again moving, getting some extra steps in throughout the day. And then, practicing your training skills. So things like, I know with our foster, with our puppies in training, one of the cues that we do with them is up and off. So getting them to jump up on different surfaces. Again, that's a really good activity, getting our dogs moving and not just sitting around and doing nothing. But training, try to set up, if it's a really bad weather, it's raining all day, try and set up 3 to 4 short training sessions, just getting them to do different activities. They know step up, so front paws on something, and then we are starting to get them like pivoting with their back ends. Even puppy push-ups, so getting our dogs from a down to a sit to a down to a sit, so getting up and down, those are great. We have introduced stand too, so that's another cue, for the dogs coming up that they can utilize. For my NSD friends, any other ideas for winter activities?
If you have more than one person, in your household. You can practice like short distance recalls back and forth. This is also probably pretty helpful for our little guys that might struggle with jumping. Having them come into that heel or near position back and forth keeps them moving. I think that's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Carly says lots of obstacle courses in the winter that they do in the house. So yeah, weaving around like even stuffies, lay out a couple of stuffies and weave in between them. Great mental stimulation and distraction practice too for all ages.
Yes, for sure. I like for Fallon, any tips for the salad? So eating grass sticks and whatever she can find. That is, it is quite very much just management. Some grass here and there. It's not a huge no, but making sure we definitely don't want them overeating grass because it can cause vomiting. Same with the sticks. Sticks for me are like a no-go. Really try to get those sticks away as soon as possible because they can kind of splinter and then we get sharp little pieces that if our dogs ingest can be quite dangerous. So I do really try to avoid sticks. The odd chomp of grass here and there, that's okay. I know sometimes it's tricky. They're just walking along and they kind of reach over and grab a mouthful.
Tom had asked suggestions for dental care, treats, food, chews, anything like that.
Dental care. So I really like it kind of depends on your dog, but definitely chewing on things like Nyla bones, Benny bones, all those things that obviously are not digestible. They're not eating them, but all those things are really great just for continuing to get that tartar off. You can do like no, we don't want smoked. I'm trying to think of the bones.
Rachel, for pets, I know they're not allowed for the NSD dogs, but can we use tartar bones? Like I use those with my dog, and they have a lot of calcium in them, and they're like more cartilage, so they kind of just crumble.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and someone posted gorilla chews. Gorilla chews can be used. Those are like for those dogs that like to chew on wood. The gorilla chews are a great option because they are just a softer wood material. But yeah, we can utilize turtle bones. It is one of those things that for the size of our dog, you just need to make sure that you're getting like a really large size. So they're actually chewing on these things and they're not just kind of like ingesting them. That's the biggest thing. You want things that are large. So they're chewing, not just like having a heyday and being like, this was great for 2 seconds. But the biggest thing for like dental care is brushing the teeth. I know it's something that nobody enjoys doing because I will admit I do not enjoy brushing dog teeth, but it should be done. So looking at doing it sort of once a day. I had the dental vet basically say like you should be brushing your dog's teeth twice a day. Just like you brush your teeth, you should be brushing your dog's teeth twice a day. That's I find it hard because I asked him if he does it with his pets and he doesn't. But any dental thing, so any kind of bones, just making sure that you're always checking your dog's teeth. So, you know, with these hard things, Nyla bones, if anybody uses like antlers or hooves, there is the potential that your dog can crack teeth. So just being mindful of that, because obviously that nobody wants that because that's in a very expensive vet bill. So just being mindful that if your dog is chewing these things, you need to keep a close eye on their mouth. Yes, Margaret, that is a lot of brushing. I don't love dentist sticks for the fact that with the dogs that we have, I tend to find they kind of just like break them in half and swallow them. Like the whole point of a dentist stick is for them to like slowly chew away at it and basically scrape the teeth. So scrape away that tartar. So if you have a dog that, you know, actually sits there and is like, okay, I'm gonna spend 10 minutes chewing away at this, then that's beneficial. But if you have a dog that bites it in half and swallows it, then you're not getting any of the dental health benefit out of it. At what age should you start brushing their teeth? So this is a great question. I tend to say, so we want to get them used to it at a young age, but you really want to avoid playing with their mouth, interacting with their mouth during the time that they're teething, because that can really put a negative association with it. So generally between the ages of like 4 and 6.5, 7 months, when they're losing all those teeth, I tend to say just leave their mouth alone. When they're young puppies, doing kind of just really brief. I like getting, basically it's like a thimble. It's just like a thumb toothbrush that you put on your finger, and you can just kind of do very quick sort of training sessions. But I would say once your dog's adult teeth come in, that's when you really want to start keeping up that dental hygiene. So generally like 8 months, usually they've lost all their teeth.